we automate all kind of stuff with the Rundeck, like user onboarding, database backups, creating review environments for developers to test their new features before they go to production. We are very much very heavy users of Rundeck and very much very happy users of Rundeck. So yeah, I think that's a good good summing it up of how we use Rundeck at HelloPrint.
We'll definitely get into more detail for sure. But how did you hear about Rundeck initially? Did you find it on a forum or?
Well, no, that's not a question for me because I heard from Rundeck at HelloPrint, so he was already there when I joined. It's more of a question for my colleague that set it up at first. So I don't really know if he's in the call, but yeah, maybe later during QA I can investigate and or maybe we can move the question over to who can actually answer it.
By the way, you now also live in the lovely country I'm from the Netherlands, but you're originally from Italy, right?
Yes, that's exactly correct.
And how did you come up to go and live in the Netherlands?
Well, I had a feeling. Let's put it like this. I came to visit Amsterdam. I kind of got a nice vibe out of it. I was really young, but I already saw something here. And later in life, a few years later, I got the opportunity to come to Amsterdam to study at first. And then after that, I was able to basically network my way through a job for a Dutch company. And through various, let's say, step forwards or backwards and sideways. Anyway, I end up now living in Amsterdam and very much happy. It's a really lovely country. I highly recommend it. But also, if you like your country, stay there because there's a housing shortage here. So it's there's so many people like this country, me included here.
So Justyn, did you hear that? Yes, for the record. Anyway, so Andrea, so how do you manage, let's say, the platform? Let's talk about that first. So you got it installed, but how do you do that? Do you do that based on code? Are you using Terraform to provision the platform, or can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so basically, I came, as I mentioned, to a Rundeck setup that was already there when I started, and it was basically deployed to its own standalone virtual machine on the cloud, and mostly provisioned with Ansible, I would say, the initial installation, and that's let's say there was way at my beginning with Rundeck, so let's say I did not do things, let's say, differently than they were already there. I kind of learned how the system was set up and kept doing things the way that they had been done before. And that way was basically just creating jobs mostly to the interface projects as well. There was a little bit of kind of a GitOpsy part to the setup because basically we have a repository where we keep some of the Rundeck configurations. So for example, some of the scripts or the Ansible playbooks that we run on the server, as well as the configuration of the users, for example, or the ACL policy. And then through Rundeck, we're able to pull the changes and apply them to the instance as it runs. So it was mostly a mix of these, right? So a little bit of files, a little bit of code that is pulled and applied to Rundeck through Rundeck, and then basically click, point and click, fill in forms that let's say the usual way, right? It's only, I gotta say, I think it's only recently that we started let's say approaching Terraform for basically taking what used to be a lot of click and write and fill in forms and also copying jobs back and forth. Basically as I said, I was learning how it was set up and I was working with it, but at the same time I was also getting a bit frustrated with the tediousness of some tasks, right? So sometimes, for example, you have say a list of parameters that are the allowed values for an option, and that those allowed values are actually shared between multiple jobs, right? But they all are part of the job definition. So if you want to modify all of them because you add a new element to the list, then you have to go through each one of them and modify it. And it's not a huge waste of time, but it's also like a terrible experience for configuring Rundeck, I would say. And that's when I first thought, hey, there must be an easy way to factor in all of these common parts and apply them all at once to all three of them. I looked at if Rundeck had an API. It did. That's cool. That's the first step towards, let's say, the golden standard, because then the golden standard would be to use, be able to declaratively leverage that API to both make changes, but also preview changes and also keep track of the configuration. So what's the next step once you learn that your product that you like to configure as an API, to look if it has a Terraform provider?
Yeah.
And lucky for me, yes, it did. And I started playing around with it, I think, in the summer. And it's also, and lately, very recently, I've also started playing heavily around with it. I can tell you more about it later, but basically in my ideal world, all of the configuration used to be, point and click and so on, ClickOps. It should be in Rundeck, and declarative, easy to apply, easy to share for collaboration, easy to review for changes. That's where I want to go. And I think it's possible. I think it's a good idea as well.
Yeah, we're trying to codify as much as possible. By that, you can enforce some standardization, and it becomes more easy to manage for sure. So initially, you already spoke a little bit about the use cases, but I would like to drill in a little bit more. And I believe you're also going to do a short demo on your UI and show the folks. But please talk us through, let's say, some of the jobs that you've built that are most used by other folks within the organization. You spoke about forms being used, but please elaborate a little bit more about those if you can.
Yeah, sure. Let me take, I think a representative example, right? So basically, I know part of our, let's say part of the software that we work with at HelloPrint, we have a website, right? So, when we keep the code for the website, in a Git repository, and let's say that's, of course, that's standard, develop, collaborate, use version control. And then, of course, version control allows you to, kind of branch out your own version to, test independent changes. And that's all fun and good when you're a local developer developing his local machine and testing these changes. But then there must be a moment where you hand things off over to, QA, to your product owner, to some other stakeholder that is involved. So basically, what you will ideally want to have is a way to basically take branches from your source repository and create basically a new deployment for the same website, right? So just an alternative version of the website, but with the other changes that I want to preview, vet, validate, and so on. Now that let's say that can be very, very easy. That can be very hard. It really, really depends on your code, on your architecture, and I must say, in our case, it's not the most straightforward process, right? So basically, because the way that this website was built way back in the 2013, and I choose a bunch of frameworks, and let's say there is some legacy, right? Not only in the architecture but also in the configuration, which make it a non-trivial task to set up such a deployment. So it needed to be automated, and automated in the form for us of a Ansible playbook that will basically allow you to set everything up to get your website up and running, right? So deploying the code to a server, and deploying a copy of a database that you can use to make local changes that the website ultimately depends on, creating DNS entries so that that website is actually reachable, doing some more initialization because you also want to make some changes to some, let's say, further changes, for example, to database, or you want to, for example, build some SAS files into CSS and bundle some JavaScript. Basically, all of that, it's a lot of work. Regrettably, I wish it was easier, but hey, that's what we're working with, and it works. So, the thing is, it's really, the first step is automating it through Ansible. That's already a big step forward, but then it's not quite ready yet to hand over to developers, right? Because developers, they already have their hands and heads full with a bunch of, tools and knowledge, and adding Ansible on top of that, and also giving them, for example, direct access to the staging server. That's probably not the best choice. That's not the choice we went with. But what we went with instead is that we created on top of that Ansible automation 3 Rundeck jobs. So basically, one to create a new environment, one to regenerate it. So sometimes you mess up massively. So you mess up your Nginx configuration, you mess up your database, you mess up whatever. You want to basically start fresh-ish. So what you want to do is basically a way to take an existing environment and refresh it, make it as if it's started new. And then, of course, you want to clean up at the end, right? So we have also another job to, basically delete an existing environment. Now, this is exactly, let's say, this is exactly the example that was kind of referring to earlier when I said that, there's a list of parameters that is the same shared between the three. Because what our website really serves is actually multiple websites, right? So we have website for various languages. So for Italian shop, Spanish shop, French shop, and they all have different URLs. And then basically the list of shops is basically a parameter into your job to create the environment, right? So because you can say, okay, deploy me a version of the website that serves the French website, the Belgian website, and the Italian website. But then at the same time, that's also some parameters that we have put into the refresh script and into the delete script, mostly as a safe check towards avoiding the developers deleting the wrong environment. So you need to put, let's say, the right parameters. You put it at the beginning, just a little sanity check. But then if you add a new shop, we do sometimes, then you have to go and modify all of them individually. It's a little pain in the ass, but it doesn't need to be. So
essentially, it takes you a lot of time to build it once, but once it's been done, then people can reuse it. That's the whole idea behind it, right?
That's pretty much it, basically. You want to make the big effort to start, and then every other effort should be incremental and simple and fast.
So Justyn and I always have the discussion if that's actually shift left. I don't care if it's shift left or shift right. You move it away so that somebody else can reuse it. No, cool.
Yeah, it's a shift away from me. I like it to think of it as I'm busy. Yeah. I got work to do. So shift away to developers.
Shift away. I like that.
Yeah. Some also said shift downwards, like give it to the machine and no longer with an L1, L2, L3. Anyways, so Andreas, would you be willing to sort of show your UI a little bit and how you build it up with projects and your jobs? Are you okay with that?
How about I actually show you a demo environment with?
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Okay, no, I don't think I want to share necessarily the environment, like the actual environment we use.
Yeah, don't give away any
I don't know. Yeah, no, I don't. Let's say I want to be more careful than let's say than possibly necessary. But let me share my screen really quick. So now you should be seeing my terminal, or do you see me?
Yeah.
You see my terminal, right? Okay. Now let me actually give you something something a little bit nicer to look at, maybe. So this is a local Rundeck environment that I have running on my local machine. It's run with Docker, and I'm also using 5.7. So, and I heard that's the last version. So pretty good on the version there. And then basically what I would like to show you really quick is, let's say, how easy it is to get started and let's say get productive with Terraform and Rundeck. So should I do that? Are you interested in that? Okay. Yeah. So what's the first step? Well, the first step I would say is for you guys at home, not for me, I already done it, is to go and read this article from the Rundeck. This will basically get you started, and be a good reference for after the call is over. But in the meantime, let me do what happens in the article in front of you guys, right? So the first thing that you want to do to get started with any Terraform project is really setting up your Terraform configuration, and that starts always with setting up the providers. And providers are, by the way, just plugins that are called by Terraform that interact with an external service as an API to provision infrastructure, right? So basically, you can think of this as just a small Go program that, based on some configuration in Terraform, is going to call the Rundeck API and apply the action that you want to be applied. And action might be creating a job or changing a job. So let's get started there. So what I'm going to do is create a small Terraform file with the code taken straight from the documentation. This is the Terraform registry where you can find all the providers. And then the next step is to initialize your Terraform directory. What this does is basically download your providers and create, basically get you ready to rumble. You can, let's say, this is a really basic setup where all operations run locally and all the information, the so-called state, is saved locally. You can also do something fancier, but that's not the purpose of this demo. But anyway, whatever you want to do, you always need to init your Terraform configuration with Terraform init. Now, next step is, of course, giving the provider the credentials to interact with your Rundeck server, right? So, you need to tell it who to talk with, so where the server is. You also want to know which API version, and also, of course, you need a token, a form of authentication to interact with Rundeck through API. Now, this is all documented here in the provider documentation, and there are many ways to set up your authentication and your connection, but I'm going to go for the environment variable approach. So basically what you can do is that you can set up a few environment variables, and then the provider will automatically be able to pick them up, right? Instead of, for example, hard coding them into files. So, and before I do that, as I mentioned, I'm going to need a access token. So let's go ahead and create one. Looks like I was logged out. Let's log me back in. Okay, so create your access token. Do as I say, not as I do. Always set an expiration in your static tokens. Don't leave them living forever. So, and I also, now bear with me on what's going to happen here. I just made my life a little bit easier to set up this environment. But basically what I did here, without explaining too much, is that I created a .env file with these values, right? So I'm saying, okay, interact with the local Rundeck instance, use API version 50, and this is your authentication, authentication and authorization token. Now, time to, we have the file, but of course we need to export our bottom variables so that they are available to sub-processes. So now we're good, now we're ready. So now it's time to, actually start creating some resources, right? So let me just go ahead and do that. Yeah, I'll take it from here. So basically, the way that Rundeck manages its configuration is through so-called resources. Yeah, let's stop at resources for today. So basically, what you're seeing here is the basic block of configuration. It's called a resource, and the available resources are usually documented in the provider page. But you can basically think of resources as basically units of deployment, units that you can create, that you can destroy, that you can modify, and it can also read if you're interested into its attributes, for example. And today, well, in front of you right now, I'm going to create two resources, right? The two basic resources to get started with Rundeck. So a project and a job running on that project. And this, what you see here is not like, the minimum configuration to give in Terraform. This is just a showcase of random options that you can set. Many options are available to, configure your jobs and your project as well. And this simple example, I'm just going to set up a project which executes on the local Rundeck node, so directly on the Rundeck server. And the job is pretty easy. It just says hello world. So now I have my configuration. I've initialized my Terraform. So next step is usually you want to see what's going to happen if you apply your Terraform configuration, and that you usually do with the plan step that is going to give you a little bit of an overview of what is going to change when you apply the configuration. And in this case, it's going to tell us that it's going to create a project and a job. So this is our plan. Then to apply our plan, actually make it a reality, because if you look at the Rundeck, nothing happened yet. We are still with the empty project and the empty jobs. But as soon as we actually apply our plan and give it a little second there to create and do its stuff. Yes, done. And if we refresh here, we actually have something. It's our main project. And is a nice little default is that the default description for project is managed by Terraform, right? So that you know that it was managed by Terraform and that you should probably not mess with it manually. But that's also not a problem. I will tell you more a bit later why that's not a problem to mess manually with the project. So we have a project, but of course we also created a job. Where is our job? Here's our job. I wish it was faster. It was a little bit anticlimactic. So we have our basic job, and it basically has all the configuration that we set up in Terraform, right? I went a bit faster, but basically, we set up in Terraform for it to have a option called foo, I think, with the default value bar. We also, it has a command step running on the local node, and let's see. It also has a notification set up on successful, and I think it also has a schedule. So as you can see, you can do a lot with the Terraform configuration. The same thing that you would need to do, let's say, pointing and clicking if you were doing it manually. So I move through it, see if it works.
Hello world.
Do we get a greeting? We do get a greeting.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So that's how easy it is to just get started with the Terraform and Rundeck. And of course, this you might say, well, do you do anything useful really? Maybe not. Admittedly not. But there's way cooler things that you can do when you start really, going deep into using more and more sophisticated Terraform features and more and more complex configurations.
Now, excellent. This is by far the most efficient way of provisioning projects and jobs within the projects. So excellent that you walk through it. And still people could have their own preference and build a job with the normal UI. Of course, you can do that too. But this is definitely, like I said, super fast and powerful. While doing all this, Andreas, what were your, let's say, limitation or challenges that you've seen by using this methodology? Are there any things that you can't do yet and that you want us to look at? Or
yes, there are, and I'm already working on that a little bit. I skip, let's say, as you may all notice, I started off with a really running Rundeck environment. It might look like I skipped on, let's say, how did I get it up running, and did you just do a vanilla setup? And those are both two good questions, because no, I did not just do a simple vanilla setup, and I had to do some things to get this running proper, especially on the latest version of Terraform, of Ansible, because basically one big limitation at the moment of the Terraform provider for Rundeck is that it relies on the XML API. Now, maybe somebody in the works knows why this is a problem. Let me see. Yeah, well, I guess you can trust me on this, but basically, we are still using in this Rundeck provider the XML API, which is problematic because the XML API is going to be deprecated. I understand, and it's also like not.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, not sure when, but we definitely talked about deprecating it in favor of JSON.
Yeah, exactly, and I think it's also like mentioned here. Yeah, basically, not only is it on its path to deprecation, but it's also not enabled by default. So in particular, in my setup, I had to basically override this default. I had to basically say, okay, enable my XML API, otherwise it's not going to work. So that's one limitation, for example. So if you have Rundeck 2 up to date, then this might just not work, because maybe you don't even have the option to enable XML anymore. So that's one limitation. Another limitation, unfortunately, which is also kind of also related to my first contribution to the provider, is that it is powerful. It does have a lot of things already out of the box, but it does not have everything that I want. That's particularly important. What do I mean by that? Let me go and try and make a small modification to our job, right? So suppose that our hello world job, instead of taking a textual option, you want to take a file option, right? So you want to upload a file and then do something with that file. And that's something that Rundeck job option allow for, right? So, uploading files is part of the the configuration of a job option. And you can also do it through the API. Now, if you go and look at the configuration for a job in Rundeck, and you look for whether or not you're able to create it as a file option, you will be disappointed, as I was, because you will find out that you can actually not do that. Even worse, if you take existing configuration and import it into Terraform and then reapply it, you will find that all of your file options have been turned into text options. So that's not fun, especially if you have many jobs with that problem. Now, as I said, I'm already working on this. Let me actually show you. So basically, it would be nice if you had an option like this where you could say, okay, this option of mine, I want it to be a file instead. But if you try and do this, Terraform is not going to be very happy about this. Now, let me do a little magic trick for you. Just bear with me. Don't ask too many questions yet. Yep. Okay. So I did a little magic trick, and now you can see that we have it as a option to add it as a file. Set the option as a file type. So let me actually apply it. And let's look at our job configuration. If we now can give it a file. Yes, see, we can give it a file. That's nice. Now, what was the magic trick that I used? Well, the magic trick is really, make the changes in the Terraform provider, in the Golang code, compile it and use that instead of the actual provider that is hosted on the Terraform registry. I already also opened a, let's see, Terraform Rundeck. I already also opened a pull request, so hopefully that gets through sometime. But that's also another limitation. Basically, sometimes you might find that what you want to do in Rundeck you cannot do with Terraform because it's not supported yet. And then there's one, last limitation, but that's more of a really technical one. It's basically the provider itself. It's running a little bit on outdated libraries, so. And that might become a problem, for the same reason why you should not use a deprecated API, because at some point you stop being able to add that as an option. So,
excellent.
So those are basically, I think those are three, pretty representative, limitations that might want to make, you might want to consider if you're thinking about, using Terraform heavily in your Rundeck configuration.
And the good thing, Andrea, this is recorded, so our product management is also going to watch this, and they will probably take notice of that. Anyway, I need to sort of cut you off a little bit, Andrea, before I need to hand it over to Justyn to sort of maintain on the agenda. I did see a couple of questions in the chat, though. Somebody asked, what are Rundeck plugins and how to extend functionality, or how does that extend functionality? Well, plugins are basically building blocks. So if you build a job within the platform, you could utilize a plugin that then sort of simplifies building of the automation. Some prerequisites are already put in the plugin. Some plugins are made in Python. Some others are made in Ruby, I believe, Justyn, it was, or Java, actually. But plugins are there. They're on the website, so people can download them. Maybe in another session we'll touch on plugins. I think we also did in the past, Xenda, I believe. So maybe we can send that link to Kanaya, who asked that question, so we can look at the previous recording.
Yeah, we actually did a session last night, also as a webinar for existing Rundeck users, and covered actually bootstrapping plugins. So there's a utility now that allows you to rapidly build plugins for whatever language you choose, whether it's Groovy, whether it's Java, whether it's Python, and it'll give you the entire framework. I mean, the way that I would describe a plugin is if I need something and I need to have it reusable, but I don't necessarily want to copy jobs around or reference jobs and things like that. Maybe I'm accessing a local API or something that's relevant to my organization. There's only one way I can get at this specific system. then wrap it up as a plugin, let your whole team use it. Now, if this is connecting to a technology that's a general technology, you might want to think about releasing it out to the community in the same way. I mean, a lot of our plugins have appeared, through community submissions also, and then we can either adopt them or we can point people in those directions. There's so many options if you want to contribute, and I certainly applaud Andrea for taking, instead of making something a problem, fixing it and then submitting it back to the community. The Terraform provider for us is community led. We do some stuff in there, and if things are really a pain, keep letting us know. Keep on the community forums is the place to do this. If it's something is really a problem, let us know, and it might appear sooner than you think. So definitely appreciate that.
But to keep a bit on the agenda, Andrea, I want to thank you very much for showing how you use infrastructure as code, or Terraform in this case, to sort of deploy projects and jobs within it, and definitely your contribution towards the Terraform provider. So lots of great work done. I did see another question, like what are the differences between open source and enterprise? That's a whole story in itself, and I want this session to be completely focused on open source. But if you're okay, the person that asked will definitely reach out and give you a bit more of a highlight. It's usually about security. It's usually about availability, more plugins, as I said before. But let's tackle that offline in this case. So
I'm going to do 3 words: scale, security, and support. Right? I mean, anyway, we can talk about that later.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So this is me, right? And let me share.
Yeah, you're on, amigo.
I need to send a request. I need to share from here, please. There we go. So just to keep things moving, because I'm conscious of time, let me pop on my slideshow. There we go. Okay, I'm going to skip a few things I really wanted to talk about as we go through. That's me, working the solution engineering team. Really sort of focused around automation, and that's me with Steve Wozniak at San Francisco Airport. So I don't tend to fanboy people too much, but I met this guy. He was really nice. We had a great chat. We talked about Apple and things like that, and he gave me his kind of cool laser cut business card, which I thought was kind of cool. Anyway, as I move on, I wanted to follow up. I did a session about a year ago about OpenAI. We were 1 year into sort of generative AI, really, and some of the things that we thought about doing. And I kind of wanted to give a checkpoint, because although, this is not necessarily core to Rundeck, this is certainly for me, generative AI and OpenAI really represent, to me, the kind of like the next generation of working, where we can all work faster, where we can make sense of complex scenarios relatively quickly. And it for me as a developer, it's not about, I don't know, it's not about taking something away. It's more about, giving me tools to move a bit faster. So anyway, when I did this originally, it was a Saturday afternoon job. I think the wife was watching Midsummer Murders or something like that on the TV, and I remember anyway. And I'm there with my my machine, and I thought, well, maybe how can I figure whether this is relevant to Rundeck and what we can do. So I did this original experiment where we would connect to the OpenAI model and build jobs on the fly, try and make them safe, run them, and things like that. So I'll show you that in a second. And the way that I talked about this, actually back in 2023, so a year ago, really. I mean, I think generative AI has been around. I think we're at about a 2-year anniversary in November, so tomorrow. And I actually compared it at the time to a few years back. We were all doing this. This idea of it was called Google dorking. If you put in very specific keywords into Google, you could get good responses out, things that you wouldn't normally have with a search. So shift forward now to to 20. Well, this was actually my 2023 conversation, but shift forward now. It's all about prompt engineering. It's about actually asking the right questions to get the right sort of sets of data. I think a year on, we also realize now that a lot of LLMs respond, particularly things like OpenAI, Olama, things like that, will respond to this role task format kind of way of doing things, where you ask to behave as a role, the task that needs to be done, and then the format that you want to return. So I just wanted to show that. So here was my original prompt that I worked with. It was quite long, so I'm not going to go through all of this. But in essence, the idea was to build me a script, embed it within a job, but also consider safety. Don't have anything that was an impact. And I'll give you a quick demo of that code. And I get this kind of quite nice output code, which I saw for me as a bit of a starter. This is my starter of some of the things that I might want to get some, in this case, some diagnostics, but also instructed to pop my variables at the top, so I could easily swap them out for options if I wanted to do that. So this was kind of the first thing that I did to just like kind of proof of concept. Can this work? Could this help me potentially build jobs in a much faster way? So I thought I'd pop all my favorite time travelers on one screen. So I'm fast forwarding now to, sort of a year down. I've got Bill and Ted and, Doc and Marty and Doctor Who in the top right-hand corner. And then, of course, our own Space Cat in the bottom left, where we're looking at things like, I've still got the GenAI job building, some, GenAI documentation for Rundeck also, where I can show you building, automatically adding the markdown for jobs as they're actually built, building schedules like the Quartz cron scheduler, giving prompts to other users. And I've seen all of these start to get used more and more. Some documentation GPT and some of our own, more in the more in the commercial version of the product. There are specific GenAI job builders in Runbook automation, so the hosted version of Rundeck, as well as something called PagerDuty Advanced, which is our whole sort of LLM foundation that we use for things like instant response and also for building jobs. I'm going to give you a quick demo as we go through. Because there's a few bits in here I'd really like to show you and get a little bit of feedback, maybe if I'm lucky. But these are some of the kind of things that we've done. So I've got maybe, I don't know, a handful of jobs. Hopefully you're all using things like emojis in your. They can be a bit of a pain for some back-end databases if they're not configured well. But they can brighten Rundeck up a little bit. Also give it a little bit of a bit of sprinkle on there. So I've got a couple of things I wanted to show you maybe. Let me start with building a job, a nice prototype. So let me just show you how I've built this quickly. Yeah, time to log in. So if you leave it long enough, I've been logged out. Yeah, cheers. So anyway, I've got my job builder, and I'm conscious I've got 10 minutes. So. Let me edit this and just show you quickly. Just a Python script that I run here. And, as Andrea said, this is a great way just to take existing scripts that you've got floating around and bring them under, sort of one environment, being able to pass data backwards and forwards. So all of my keys are stored in a key store, and, I can pass data across easily between, different jobs and things like that. So I do a couple of things. One, I copy a template for a job, much like, the jobs are defined in JSON, so it's easy for me to deal with. And then I use a Python file to firstly process the script from the prompt that I get returned, and then actually insert at different areas within the job before applying it back to the environment. So let me just show you this working quickly. I'm going to run this, and there is actually, well, okay, bear with me 1 second. I'm not even, yeah. I'm getting an error now. Excuse me. Yeah. Let me run this right from the beginning.
still a live demo, Justyn. You there? So that's good.
Yeah. I don't know. Pick a technology. Let me go for generate Kubernetes event log diagnostics. Okay, so run the job now, and there's a few things to configure. Okay, one of them being where am I actually going to put this? I'm going to put this in this particular project production. Which group? So I've got kind of a safety group now, a job group that says please review before releasing, because nobody wants to go and just run code that's come straight out of a out of a OpenAI or some sort of LLM. You probably want to do a little bit of testing. But there it is. So there's my job that's created, and I can see within my workflow, this would be this would be typically what it's created. I've instructed it to use things like emojis and colors and things like that, but that's all in my and it's just running some kubectl commands. There is the ability then just to replace the namespace with options and things like that to pass through. But for me, it kickstarts this. I mean, if I was going to go and maybe look at Stack Overflow or, go and try and figure out, well, I need to do some base things. What else can I do? I find this actually really creative for this kind of thing. So I've created this. I created this job. Now, the second thing I want to show you, just given time, I'm only going to be 2 more minutes because this is how it works, is I've grabbed the job ID. Okay, so that's the unique ID that's associated with the job. And I'm going to use documentation assistant. So the idea here is that we know if we're building lots of Rundeck jobs that, doing the markdown at the end is a pain, right?
Nobody wants to do that.
Nobody wants to do it, right? I don't care. I would challenge anybody who says I enjoy doing markdown. So what I've got, just drop the UUID in there. So this is completely live. I didn't really know what I was going to do for the job. So now I'm going to say to this, okay, and this is great for. Well, I think this is a great use for an LLM because it means that I can, it'll make sense of the job and what it's doing, and I can review it and I can change it if I want. But it's taken some of the, the donkey work out for me. I've also got options in here to upload to Confluence as well. I worked with a customer who wanted to actually display all of their jobs in Confluence. So now if I go and have a look at my environment, it gives me a job description, puts me a little banner saying it's GenAI documentation, what's happened, what options are available, then the namespace should be done there, all those things. And I can modify that and rerun the documentation assistant, and then it will update that accordingly for me. So these are really just about trying to make my life a bit easier, or other people's lives a little bit easier. Now, I have a number of other things that I could show. Conscious of time, there's
maybe Justyn, maybe in the meantime, if anybody would be willing to type in the chat if you also tried something like this, that would be good to know.
One thing I'm quite happy to do also is pop these up on a repo and let anybody have these as because this is community and this is what we do, right? So to give you something to play with, or if you're thinking about doing that sort of thing. One thing I did get asked about was about security, okay, because we don't want to be popping anything sensitive out. So this will also work, for example, with a local LLM. I'm using Olama here. Actually, in this case, one of my customers had a real problem with Quartz Scheduler, Cron Quartz Scheduler, where you do the stars and things like that. So I thought, well, okay, I'll build something in a plain language. So it says every third Tuesday. What do I need to pop in for that? And then I should get a response. It's a little bit slower because the machine that I'm running on this is dog slow. But there we go. Anyway, you get the idea. But the interesting part of that is that it's a local LLM rather rather than, having to go to an API or something like that. And of course, it can make sense of, complex environments. I'm just going to run this last one, and then we'll open to any questions. Please fire them in the chat window also. So I've got a job here that is going to, I'm trying to remember exactly what this has done. Oh yeah, so this is last. So this is looking at the last logins on my machine here, okay? Then I've got a reusable job that I used that says analyze this and give me any patterns that I should be aware of. So, this is just telling me, this is just my login, so it might not be that interesting, but, the user had a long continuous session, which might be unusual and could indicate a possible issue like forgetting to log out. There are so many use cases here: security, making sense of logs, making sense of your own internal data, web logs, things like that you could potentially use generative AI, which is very good, I think, for, at least giving me some ideas of why this might be.
You could spend the whole session on the topic on its own, Justyn.
I could, but I think I'm going to leave it there and leave it open for any questions if anybody's got anything.
2 minutes. And I didn't see anybody type in the chat that they tried something themselves so far, so maybe you're ahead of it. Andrea, did you do something like this yourself as well, or no, not yet?
No, not really, but this is really insightful. I'm actually curious to try. Maybe we can take even more of my load.
And then, yes, we want to thank you for your participation. We'll have a next meetup. You hear from us, don't worry, for our next one. We'll probably meet next year in the first quarter. And until then, you can jump in PagerDuty Commons to continue this conversation, or join the meetup for EMEA Rundeck by PagerDuty.